Hello, everybody. Welcome to another installment of Biology in the Basement with your host, Mr. Andraco. We are now done with the nervous system. We're moving on to the other boss of the body, the endocrine system. So the purpose of this video is to talk about the endocrine system and how it helps to control different functions of the body. We'll spend a couple days on this, going deep into the pancreas and comparing and contrasting the nervous and endocrine systems before we move on to reproduction. So that's what this week is going to look like. So let's have a fact of the day so that we can get started. And it turns out that scientists have discovered that there is a bacteria that if it lives on a mosquito, it can prevent malaria from being established and that thus transferred to a human. So I don't know how they're going to expose all these mosquitoes with this bacteria, but it does help to start the ever-growing problem of malaria in a lot of these third world countries. So good news on that front. Also, another fact is probably why it's so expensive to live in Iceland, because Iceland is one of the only places on Earth that doesn't have mosquitoes. So if you're like me, every time the sun comes out a little bit, those mosquitoes start coming out, and I don't like them. Anyways, let's talk about the endocrine system. It's got two big important words here, and the two big ones that you should remember: glands, hormones, right? These are the organs. The glands are the organs located throughout the body, and they release hormones. The hormones are the messages. Just like in the nervous system, the messages were called impulses. In the endocrine system, the messages are called hormones. Okay? These travel through the bloodstream and not neurons. A hormone can be defined in two words: chemical message. Okay, we'll keep it that simple. Just a chemical message that, in this case, we're focusing on the endocrine glands. We will talk about exocrine in a second, but we're focusing on these hormones that are traveling through the bloodstream to find target cells. That's another important word for you to know, is the target cell and how it finds its special location. And I'll go into more detail on the next slide. But there are two types of glands. The one type of gland is the one that we've been focusing on, things like salivary glands, right? And your tear ducts producing lacrimal fluid, and other glands like your liver that produces bile, your pancreas when it's producing enzymes and things like that, the inner linings of your intestines. Those are exocrine glands because they're going directly to where they're being used. Hormones are part of the endocrine system, right, within, because they are traveling within the blood. And their job is to find that designated target cell so that they can stop, start, speed up, or slow down a process, right? We have glands throughout the body, as you saw in that first slide. They release their hormone into the bloodstream. The bloodstream carries this hormone around and bumps into a whole bunch of cells until it finds that target cell. Here's another spot where we go specific, like enzyme and substrate, antigen and antibody, things like that, neurotransmitters and their receptor sites. This is another example of hormone and target cell. These things fit like lock and key. So they will find their target cell and start, stop, slow down, speed up, whatever the body needs at that time. The best example that I like to give is, of course, we're going to start talking about sexual reproduction next and human reproduction. And I always talk about puberty, where, when you go through puberty, hormones are released and you start growing hair in weird places. And but you still never grow hair on the palms of your hands or the bottom of your feet. Why is that? Well, you don't have receptor cells. Your hands are not target cells for hair follicles to be produced or to produce hair. So that's just one very simple example. All right, so here are your glands. Now, for you to understand the first couple, what we need to do is we need to look at your knowledge of the three branches of our government. Okay? Now, I always like to tie in English and social studies a lot when it comes to understanding some of these concepts, whether stories or words or just historical things. In this case, it's the setup of our government, where we have the executive branch, right? We have the legislative branch, and we have the judicial branch, right? So our body is run very similar to three branches of government. Your executive, who is making your decisions day in and day out, is your brain, right? Specifically, your cerebrum. Your cerebrum is the decision maker, problem solver, right? Voluntary movement operator, okay? Of course, your body can't just do anything it wants all the time, right? Your blood sugar gets low and you get hungry or you get tired or you can't be in the sun all day or you can't just go run indefinitely, right? So you have mechanisms in place that will slow you down or stop you from abusing or hurting yourself, right? This would be your pituitary gland, right? Your pituitary gland's the one that's like, hey, we're using up resources. Let this guy know, make you drowsy, make you dizzy, make you woozy, make you sick. Your stomach hurts, you throw up, whatever, you pass out, right? You got sunburn to protect. That's what the pituitary gland does. It is telling the rest of the body how to take care of what the executive is doing, right? So it's going to regulate, try to keep in check, and make sure, okay, that it is controlling the executive with, logic, and our body can only do so much. On the other side there, we also have our hypothalamus. The hypothalamus controls the pituitary gland and says, okay, yeah, you're right. Here's more of this hormone that I've had stored up. Use it so that you can help the body do this. Or, no, we need to stop that, so I'm going to withhold this hormone from you. And so that is kind of how these three guys interact, in about as simple of an explanation as I can give you using the three branches of government. But it always seems to make sense when we look at those three parts, these two glands plus your cerebrum. The pineal gland is in charge of sleep and wake cycles. Your thyroid gland deals with all of the calcium and magnesium and other minerals of the body, like we talked about in the skeletal system and even in the nervous system, where calcium is involved in neurotransmission. Your thyroid gland regulates metabolism. That, of course, is, how you process, your energy and things like that. People have different just overall attitudes, as well as different body shapes and sizes based on how overactive, underactive, or proper their thyroid gland works. All right, we've already gone over the exocrine side of the pancreas, producing the sodium bicarbonate and the other enzymes that help in digestion. But we are going to spend the lecture tomorrow going specifically over the blood sugar levels of the nitty-gritty of how that happens. So I will explain that tomorrow. Thymus, another one we touched on briefly. The thymus deals with your nerve or your immune system, right? Remember those cool killer T cells that are like the zombie killers? They are in charge of turning normal white blood cells into killer T cells and help with that side of the immune response, which is the cell-mediated side. The adrenal gland does a few things. The adrenal gland is really two glands wrapped in one. The adrenal medulla on the inside, and then wrapped around the outside is the adrenal cortex. So between these two glands, they deal with lots and lots of things, most of them related to just simple survival, basic structure functioning of your body, as you can see here in the list. But of course, we also know that our adrenal medulla produces the adrenaline that helps us out in that fight or flight scenario. Okay, so here are your adrenal glands. Now, as you can see, they're centrally located in the body so that when they are needed, they can be pumped very quickly to all parts of the body. Because, like I said, the one side is dealing with a lot of involuntary functions that are also controlled by your brainstem, but also the whole fight or flight and pumping adrenaline. Now, here's the interesting thing about adrenaline. Adrenaline heightens so many things. It heightens your senses, like you hear better, you see better, smell better, everything. Like if when people recollect their experiences of being on adrenaline, number one, heightened senses, right? Massive blood flow, heart rate, right? Sweating, you are ready to go. You even hear of mothers lifting cars off of their babies, right? Where you can do anything, right? But did the mother think about doing that? Did the mother ever put any logic to that? She's just like, no, I gotta get my baby, because the other thing that happens when adrenaline is flowing through your bloodstream is that your brain function goes way down. And usually we discuss for a while in class why that is, and I will spoil it for you. The answer is if you spend too much time thinking about things, then you die. Life has shown us, and even through evolution, if you stand there and you're like, oh, this chuck looks pretty big, it's coming at me, should I move? Maybe I could just fight it. Maybe it's not real. I don't know, and then boom, you're dead. So, this is why sometimes it's better to just make a move and just go with it. If you're going to fight, you fight. If you're going to run, you run. You don't sit there thinking about it, Your body makes a decision and goes with it. So I always think that's pretty interesting, aside of adrenaline, okay? We'll talk about the ins and outs of that, but, of course, we have to mention these guys first. Ovaries and testes, as we will talk about later this week, are also glands. We will talk about them as gonads, right? Gamete-producing organs of sperm and egg, but they are also glands that regulate the reproductive cycle mostly. Especially in females, estrogen, progesterone, the luteinizing hormone, and the follicle-stimulating hormone are the four hormones that are involved in regulating the menstrual cycle. And two of them, as you can see, come from the ovaries. In the testes not only initiate sperm production and control sperm production, but they tell us when it begins. They initiate puberty, and along with puberty comes other secondary sexual characteristics, the deeper voice, the larger frame, things like that make us more able to reproduce, at least in the past when we were evolving, and we needed to be loud and tough and whatever to protect whatever resources we may have hunted and gathered with our little clan. So that was how it worked, and the testes were also responsible for that. But we'll talk more about that when we get into reproduction and development. But like I said, tomorrow we talk the whole pancreas, and then we'll review your homework assignment will be age 197 to 198. 197 and 198 will be your homework. So that will cover that, and we'll talk more about hormones again. All right, have a good one.